impacted. And she seems to have been taken under the wing of not only a group of what they used to call praying Mohawks, a holy family, as it were, of people, but also by one particular person by the name of Anastasia. Anastasia became her mentor. What I'm saying right here is that the ways in which we, as a Christian community, can bring the presence of Christ to others is clear above all from family life, through good, solid family lives. Particularly men and women united around Jesus Christ as the center of their lives. And this is what the first evangelists, the first American evangelists experienced. And they created these small communities of faith, very much like our parishes, perhaps on a smaller scale, which were really families of families. And what better definition of a parish is there than a family of families, and a family for those who have no family? And that was, of course, where Kateri found herself literally orphaned after 2 years without parents, taken under the wing of these praying Mohawks who learned the love of Jesus for her, who learned about the Mass, who learned about the Rosary, who learned about Eucharistic devotion, and learned about the lives of the saints. She ultimately was to take the name of Kateri when she was baptized at 19 from St. Catherine of Siena. But also experiencing the mentoring, as I mentioned, of this very holy woman, Anastasia. Recall that in many of the Indian cultures, particularly in the Mohawk culture, it was a matriarchal culture. And what happened was that the clan mothers, they lived in longhouses. Every longhouse had a kind of a clan mother who would oversee what was going on there. And they were often the ones that were the matchmakers that decided. As a matter of fact, the two people who founded this small community, which ended up on the shores of the St. Lawrence River, was actually a match made by one of the clan mothers of a Huron, and I think it was an Oneida Indian, which was the tribe just to the west of the Mohawks in the Iroquois Nation. And she was the one that made the choice. Now, Anastasia had plans for Kateri. She saw the character of this woman, and she thought she would make her into a clan mother as well, too. Kateri would have nothing of it. As a matter of fact, and as an example, these people were not perfect. None of these, as you read a little bit more, and there are wonderful accounts of these, but if you read more about these wonderful saints, I'd like to call them, if Kateri was the lily of the Mohawks, we had many roses as well, too. It was almost like a garden of faith that was nourishing the lives of so many saintly people, these praying Mohawks, and this culture that was just flourishing. Well, once again, Kateri's mentor, Anastasia, had plans for Kateri. Kateri said no. She refused to marry. And of course that was almost verboten in those days. But it was interesting the reason why she did. She refused marriage because she said she wanted to be married to Jesus alone. So in other words, her refusal of marriage had nothing to do with an abhorrence for sexuality, or an abhorrence for men, or an abhorrence for, obviously, the important position of authority that it would put her in by being a mother, the mother of the clan, because mothers were very, very much respected, because they brought children into the world, and because the survival of the community very clearly depended upon their increase. But because she believed, somehow or other, that her mother, her unique relationship with Jesus, she saw it in a way that, in a sense, transcended or transfigured marriage itself. Now, I say this a little bit theological, but I say my inspiration has been both Native Americans and their holiness in this first evangelization, and the mysteries of the Rosary, particularly the luminous mysteries. And recall, Father Winslow alluded to some of them, recall the baptism of Jesus, which is the first of the luminous mysteries. That Jesus himself immerses himself fully in the human condition. In every way, he felt life. So as a model for us, here is a God that comes to us and says the way to become holy, the way to become godlike, is not to lift ourselves above our everyday challenges, but rather to immerse ourselves right in them. And even if it's a struggle with sin, whether it's our own personal sin, or it's somebody else's sin that we feel affected by, whether it's in the culture, whether it's in the neighborhood, whether it's even in the church, whether it's in the family, is not to walk away from it, but to confront it right in the face. Not to serve the demon, but to conquer it by our own holiness, by our own trust in the Lord, who alone can pull us through. Yes, by going right into that tomb, trusting that He will lead us out the other side. By identifying the evil, but not being mastered by it. And Jesus Himself leads the way. Remember that baptism, the baptism of Christ, was a baptism into sin, into the sinful condition of the world that would ultimately kill Him or take His physical life away, but that He would conquer because He was divine. And that He offers us the opportunity by aligning ourselves, by melding ourselves with Him, also to conquer the evil one. The second mystery of that set of mysteries is Jesus' Cana miracle, in which He holds up marriage as that unique relationship through which His presence comes to the world. He identifies Himself, begins to identify Himself in His public ministry by what He does to raise couples up, to raise a couple up, and therefore raises marriage to a dignity that would be the church of His presence for all time. Any reason why we should be surprised that we call marriage, the family, the domestic church. And as we look to the example of the first evangelist, this is exactly how the church grew on the very grounds that today we are worshiping on. This is our model. But there's more. A beautiful way, and this is something that Carrie herself experienced through her mentor, Anastasia, was spiritual mentoring. The tremendous value of dedicating oneself to the holiness of another person, which might be a friend, it might be a neighbor, it might be a person struggling with an addiction, it might be just an annoying acquaintance that tells the same story all the time, that by our presence and by our love, in some way we'd like to say, you matter, you count. Maybe nobody else pays attention to you, but I will. And it happens in so many ways in the lives that you live. I'm sure each and every one of us knows that person or those persons that we really do pray for, especially because of their challenges. Well, Anastasia, Katharine had her mentor in Anastasia. And by the way, they didn't always see eye to eye. As a matter of fact, the accounts are that they had a particularly loud argument when Katharine refused to be married, and Anastasia thought that she was losing her precisely because she wasn't going to fulfill her destiny as the planned mother that she hoped she would be. But it was Katharine's holiness that led Anastasia to see that Katharine actually had chosen a better way at this particular time. And somehow or other, God was going to take Katharine and hold her up as a model for each and every one of us. By her sacrifice, by her willingness to give up her life for the sake of her people in a different way. And how beautifully this was able to unfold without denying her cultural roots, but actually by transforming them, by transfiguring them. Then we get to the next mystery of the Rosary. I left out the third one. Well, the third one is actually the Annunciation of the Gospel, which is what every disciple is asked to do. And spiritual mentoring, of which I spoke, is just that. That's what evangelization is all about. Bringing Christ to everyone we meet, one person at a time. Bringing His real presence. If we are tabernacles of that Holy Spirit, if we believe that Jesus is in us, trusting that as He brings us into communion with friends and neighbors and strangers. that somehow or other he will allow his presence to unite both of us in love of him. Yes, the fourth mystery is the mystery of the Transfiguration. How Jesus, who appears to be just Jesus, people only know because he was the carpenter's son, suddenly becomes transformed and transfigured in the eyes of the apostles. Who is this? Where did he get this? Why does he look like that? Where does all that glory come from? As the Father reveals to us. And so too does the Lord transfigure our relationships, as he did with Catherine, giving her the capacity to take her sufferings, uniting them with the cross, and allowing the Lord to make of her beautiful, beautiful flower of faith that she is. And with so many other of our spiritual ancestors here in the region, who show us by their example, had their trust in the Lord, transformed their married lives, transformed their personal lives, gave them a true identity and a true purpose in their lives, that we, each and every one of us, are now, as they pray for us, beneficiaries of their love. Finally, of course, the final mystery is the Eucharist itself, which we're about to celebrate. Because this is where the transfiguring, transforming power of God's grace begins. And it was the center of the lives of the first martyrs and of the praying Catholics in the first evangelization. So, my brothers and sisters, today I challenge you to begin here and now the second evangelization that begins with you and me. The same place it began for our spiritual ancestors, the saints, the first martyrs, the flowers of the Mohawk, if you will, right on these grounds, as we celebrate this Mass, as the first martyrs did. Let's unite with them, who are still with us today, who have loved us and prayed for us, for each and every one of us, that we would follow the call to be here today, to hear the message of God's love for us personally, a love that is so deep that it embraces every one of us, enough to die for us, so that each and every one of us can live forever and become a saint. I don't know how often we hear that your mission and mine is to become a saint. How do you do that? Well, Matthew Kelly has a good formula. He says, you got to get holy. Easy for you to say, right? Here's his trick. Here's the formula. If we start worrying about, we look at ourselves, we look at our sins, we look at our weaknesses, and if you're not sure if you have any, ask the person next to you. You look at you say, how can I possibly do this? It's this simple. Make every moment a holy moment. Every moment a holy moment. How do we do it? It's really what it is. If you want to say it a little bit more sophisticated way, it's intentional Christianity, intentional Catholicism. These communities created by these praying Catholics were intentional communities of faith, in which it was the desire and the will and the purpose of every person that was a baptized Christian to actually form communities that live the gospel. And we hear a lot of ways of doing that, but each and every one of us makes that personal intention. Lord, I want to make every moment of my life from this day forward a holy moment. And let the Lord set the table for us as to how that might take place. You know, Jesus liked to eat. You ever notice? Many, many times what he used as a means, what he used certainly as a come on, sometimes as a reward, was that he would feed people, right? Many of his miracles, he felt sorry for people. He didn't want to send them away hungry. That he chose as the way of communicating to us. His very presence was in the non-threatening form of a meal, where people put their feet under the same table and could look one another in the eye and listen to one another's stories and pray together. That Jesus invites us to do this, not only as we celebrate his real presence in our midst, but as we go now into the world and accompany one another on the journey of life. the more that we can invite every person into our life, the more that we can accept that God leads us to where we need to be and with whom we need to be, and accept in that relationship, that invitation, a call, an opportunity to holiness. One moment at a time. If we look at life that way, then there's no moment that needs to be boring, no moment that needs to be useless, no moment that needs to be shunned, but we accept everything that comes our way, as the first martyrs did, as St. Catherine did, as we see Mary herself throughout her life. A woman who was always there, always present. Can't say the same thing about the apostles, but eventually they learned. Let's follow their example. Know that they love us and that they're with us. Walk with them in faith as God's people. Intentional Catholics now. And knowing that the Lord will always be with us.
Thank you, Bishop Scharfenberger. At this time, we are going to get ready for